Really, it just kind of seems like the hits keep coming because now we have Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, which I think is really good. I went into it kind of not knowing because Uncharted 4 I stand at a very weird place with. Really, really liked it, really enjoyed it, but I also thought by the end I was ready for it to end. I thought it outstayed its welcome just a little tiny bit. It was a long game, and I felt like it had a little padding here and there, so I wasn't sure if I was going to be head over heels for more Uncharted. Yes, I'm excited because I do love this series very much. It's got to be at least in my top 10, but I went into it feeling weird, especially just because it's the first Uncharted game without Nathan Drake. And I say Uncharted game because it's a pretty lengthy adventure. It's not a full-price game, but it's still very much a substantive thing that'll take you quite a few hours, and it's a full, self-contained adventure. And honestly, I'm very happy. Honestly, I could say I think Uncharted is in the right hands. And just a heads up, I am going to talk spoilers in the end because I talked spoilers at the end in another video recently and I saw everyone saying, what the hell? You didn't say spoilers. I did. Pay attention. But getting right into it, Lost Legacy is set up very differently than the Uncharted games. Structurally, it's bookended by big action sequences, but most of the middle of the game is kind of like an open environment that you explore. You don't spend the entire game there, but it's basically like a bigger Madagascar sequence from Uncharted 4 where you're driving around in a Jeep in the mud. Now it's in the Western Ghats of India, and it feels similar, but it's gorgeous. I feel like it looks 10 times more beautiful, which is crazy because it's a bigger world. I don't know how they really did it, but it's interesting because it has a little spin on side objectives in terms of finding little hidden areas and finding puzzles and basically collecting all these coins to unlock a certain something. Think of like the Assassin's Creed games when you're trying to unlock that assassin armor at the end of the game and you have to go around and collect little hidden things here and there. It's like that, sometimes with encounters, sometimes with some pretty difficult puzzles, and there's a lot of puzzles in this game. The balance is very different. There's actually a little less shooting, which I did find kind of interesting. There's still plenty of combat, there's still plenty of excitement, but there's a good focus on puzzles here. It's a good balance. There's a good balance of slow story moments, walking around, smelling the roses, exploring, climbing mountains, then also tons of puzzles and some combat. The puzzles here, some of them honestly made me feel kind of stupid. I had to look up a guide for one of them, I will admit. It does pain me to say that a little bit, but we're honest here, right? So I'm telling you guys. But I said it in my Before You Buy, and I will say it here, my one biggest criticism is just the fact that it doesn't do too much new other than the structure. You know, combat and scenarios are basically the same. You do get a silenced pistol this time around, and there are some pretty interesting vehicle encounters that I really did enjoy, but that's about it. I think the main focus, at least a difference, is the main characters. Chloe and Nadine make for a really good pair. You can tell right from the beginning there's this uneasy alliance. That whole sequence that we saw when the game was announced and everyone thought it was Tomb Raider at first, that whole beginning is an incredible, just straight up 100% Uncharted experience. But once you start getting to know Chloe and Nadine, first of all, gotta say, huge fan of Chloe. I always have been since Uncharted 2. Here, big fan of her butt. It's really distracting in the game. Can I say that? I don't know. But they make for two very different people, and I'm glad Chloe finally kind of got her place in the spotlight because she is interesting. She's very much like the opposite, the polar opposite of Nathan Drake in some ways. She's also very similar. Like she's super smart, she's a history nerd, and she goes crazy to figure things out. She is very much a treasure hunter, just like Nathan Drake, and you can tell that's why they hit it off. But she's also a bit more of a brute. She's a bit more bombastic. She smashes into things, she kills people indiscriminately, and she really just doesn't give a shit about what she does. She jumps into things with not really much of a plan, and she still kind of comes off a little bit as not a bad guy, but a gray guy, more so gray than Nathan Drake. And I think that's what's interesting here is that Chloe and Nadine are both kind of people who are walking this moral line. Nadine seems like the better person, but she ran a Merc company and did bad things with them. Here, she's disgraced from that whole thing and she's basically teaming up with Chloe to do a job to get money, and that's it. There is more to it. There is more of a personal side to it later on that I don't want to get into. There is obviously more once they explore the characters, but straight up, you just have these characters doing their thing, and it's interesting, and it makes for a good dynamic, especially by the time they really start to get to know each other. They make for a really good pair. They get into some scraps, and they're fucking badass. I know some of you guys out there are just gonna have a problem with playing as a girl, and chances are I can't really change your mind, but I will say that it doesn't feel forced, and it feels natural, and it's really, really good, and entertaining, most importantly. And speaking of entertaining, it's also fun because it's Uncharted. You know, the combat here is still very much what it is. The stealth aspects really make things feel kind of tense. There's a lot of rope climbing. There's still a lot of like pulling crates and doing things like that, which the game does acknowledge with a funny joke, but but you're doing basically the same stuff you did in Uncharted 4, which I don't think is bad, especially because this one is more focused. This is well-paced. It goes from beginning to end. There's not a lot of padding. It goes out and it says exactly what it wants to do. It really kind of only takes place in one setting, roughly. But it's kind of like a satisfying story from beginning to end, because you also have a villain who's just a ruthless asshole. That's really all he really has. He's smart, he comes off very normal, but he's just a big dumb jerk. And while, yeah, sometimes the villain's just being dastardly evil doesn't really do it for me, here it just did. I don't know. Not to mention, I gotta say, the game is absolutely gorgeous. Sometimes it's hard for me to just like praise head over heels how amazing the game looks, but if you got a decent TV and you got a PS4 Pro, it looks really good. And I play games on PC, but this is really impressive. Naughty Dog is really good at this shit. There's so much detail, weather effects, water, lighting, detail on the characters, dirt, rips, real-time things happening. I just love looking at it, and the camera mode is back with a couple little different features that you should check out. But ultimately, I'm just very happy because I didn't think I would say this. I was very worried. I really didn't think it would work without Nathan Drake, but here I am, really loving an Uncharted game, and Nathan Drake is nowhere to be found. So I'm happy, and I'm excited if they do eventually make more Uncharted games, if Sony takes the Uncharted name and just keeps going with it. I am going to be open-minded because this game, for me, completely worked. Not only that, I also found it really impressive that the game takes place a little bit after the events of Uncharted 4, but it doesn't completely have to lean on Uncharted 4. They don't reference Nathan Drake every 5 minutes. You don't really have to play Uncharted 4 to really understand what's going on here. You get it. For the most part. I do think this is a really fun game. It's a good Uncharted game. I beat it in 6.5 hours, but I'm going to go back and get a platinum because it's pretty easy. There's things to collect, there's little side objectives to do, treasures to hunt down, and it's a cheaper price game. It's $40, so I'm going to leave that up to you. Some people like to equate every hour of gameplay spent to every dollar in the game. I do just think if you are a big Uncharted fan, I do think it's worth your time, especially if you're an Uncharted 2 fan. I definitely am, and one thing here really made me smile, but that's going into spoiler territory. So now, spoiler warning. Let's get into it if you did play the game. If you didn't play it, go beat it and come back. But let's talk about it. First things first, Sam Drake. It was really good for him to show up, not only just showing up as a cameo, but eventually becoming a part of the whole trio thing, the whole adventure. And he made for some really good comedic levity here, because while Chloe is the less serious one, she still has her things going on. Nadine is obviously very serious most of the time. Sam was a really good monkey wrench into that pair, and it fit perfectly. Honestly, a game with the three of them is pretty interesting, and it's part of the reason why it made me feel like Uncharted is in good hands without Nathan Drake. But really, the only spoiler thing I really wanted to talk about was the last big action set-piece sequence on the train. As someone who loved Uncharted 2 and loved that train sequence more than anything, easily one of my favorite video game moments ever, to get it again in kind of a different version on a rickety old Indian train was awesome. It was just kind of like a big garbage train with a bomb on it, and it made for a really good sequence when you're shooting dudes on top, you're jumping onto Jeeps, then you're driving the Jeep and ramming dudes off of motorcycles. It was a really good transition between Uncharted 2's train scene and the Madagascar chase from the original Uncharted 4. It worked perfectly, and it was just such a damn good sequence. Not only that, but that fist fight with the bad guy at the end I thought was really good, especially since we had a fight at the end of Uncharted 4, but here, with two people wailing on a dude, it actually felt pretty dynamic and very interesting. This dude was beating ass. But then Chloe and Nadine really beat his ass, and it was fun to watch. It really honestly didn't take itself as seriously as Uncharted 4. Uncharted 4 was very character focused and what's going on. And here it's character focused, but it's way more fun. It's like, hey, we're hunting treasure, then we gotta save the world. Boom, we save the world. And honestly, that's kind of just what I wanted. That was a nice playthrough, and I dug that. But if you can't tell, I really like The Lost Legacy. I think you should play it. Like I said, again, if you are a diehard Uncharted fan, you shouldn't even think twice. You should play it, because it's really awesome. If you haven't played it, I do want to know what you think. If you did beat it, I want to know what you think of the ending. Try not to spoil anything in the comments for some people, or tag it with spoilers or whatever. And if you haven't played it, if you're on the outside looking in, I do want to know what you're thinking. Are you going to jump in? Do you think the price is worth it? I think it is. You also get access to the Uncharted 4 multiplayer in the survival mode, which the survival mode is actually pretty awesome. I jumped in when they did it with Uncharted 4, and it's definitely worth checking out. It's horde mode, basically. But let's talk anything Uncharted Lost Legacy. If you got anything for me, you can hit me up here, or Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Jake Baldino. Send me some hate mail, send me some love, send me some cookies. That'd be good. But you know the deal. Thanks as always for coming around to this humble channel and listening to me ramble about video games and stuff. Really appreciate it. You guys know I'm Jake Baldino. You can subscribe because video games.